As we reported, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in New Delhi attending the G20 summit. It's the last stop on his tour of Asia this week. His tour so far has been all about strengthening ties with other countries and promoting Canada as a trade partner. But that may be a tough sell in the host country for this G20 summit. Our Evan Dyer is traveling with the Prime Minister.
Well, it wasn't clear right up until the eve of the G20 Leaders Summit here in New Delhi whether Prime Minister Trudeau would have any meeting at all with the host of this summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India. But we did learn a short while ago from a Canadian government source that the two are expected to meet on Sunday in what's called a pull-aside, which is the most informal kind of meeting. We had already heard quite some time ago that there were meetings expected between Narendra Modi and the leaders of the United States, of the UK, and of Australia, and those are more formal bilateral meetings. The meeting between Prime Minister Trudeau and Narendra Modi, a pull-aside, is expected to last only about 10 minutes, so not much time to discuss any substantive issues, but it is enough to avoid the kind of a snub that would have raised questions about the state of Indian-Canadian relations, which have not been great, were not great during Prime Minister Trudeau's last visit in 2018, and clearly some of those tensions do still persist. We saw a recent suspension of Canadian-Indian free trade talks, for example. One of the issues between India and Canada then as now is the suspicion of India that Canada is a safe haven for Sikh separatists. And India was also annoyed with Prime Minister Trudeau in 2020 when he expressed support for the farmers' protests here in India, which brought this capital, New Delhi, almost to a standstill, a sort of a giant version of the convoy protests in Ottawa, considerably more violent and went on for quite a bit longer. And in addition to that, the Indian government saw those protests as being infiltrated by Sikh separatists, by Khalistani separatists. And so Prime Minister Trudeau's support for those protests reinforced some of the suspicions that the Indian government seemed to have. It's also worth mentioning that the Canadian Intelligence Service, CSIS, has pointed the finger at India as one of the sources of foreign interference in Canada. So there are tensions between the two, but Narendra Modi is very keen to have a successful summit, just as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is keen to smooth over and leave those tense moments between India and Canada in the past. So India has really pulled out all the stops and spared no effort to make this a successful summit. Here in New Delhi, for example, we've seen shanty towns have been walled over, in some cases, in fact, bulldozed to make the city look better for the summit. There's also been a number of very severe restrictions put in place on the residents of the city. Commerce is banned in the center of New Delhi for 3 days. Tourists have been evacuated from hotels and basically ordered to leave the center of the city to make room for delegates. And in addition, residents of the center of New Delhi are prohibited from leaving their homes unless they have a valid excuse, such as a medical appointment. So a lot of effort by India to make this a successful summit, starting tomorrow and running for 2 days.